Have you ever judged someone in just a few seconds, only to discover they were the most extraordinary person in the room? What would you do if the quiet stranger everyone ignored turned out to be the only person who could save your life? Rain tapped gently against the airport windows while passengers hurried toward Gate 14. Most people were focused on their phones, business calls, or finding a place to charge their devices. Nobody noticed the elderly woman sitting alone near the corner. She wore a faded gray jacket that had clearly seen many winters. A small canvas travel bag rested beside her chair. Her shoes looked old but carefully polished. She wasn't trying to attract attention. In fact, she seemed comfortable being invisible. Her name was Evelyn Carter. She quietly watched people rushing past her, smiling whenever a child laughed or someone helped another traveler with heavy luggage. After a few minutes, the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Passengers stood immediately, forming a long line that stretched almost to the coffee shop. Evelyn waited. She had learned long ago that there was no reason to fight for a place in line. When the crowd became smaller, she slowly stood up, picked up her canvas bag, and walked toward the boarding gate. The airline employee greeted passengers with a practiced smile until Evelyn handed over her boarding pass. The employee scanned it. The smile disappeared. She scanned it again. Then she frowned. "I'm sorry, Mom. Could you please step to the side for a moment?" Evelyn simply nodded. "Of course." She stepped aside without asking questions. Several passengers glanced at her before looking away. They assumed something was wrong with her ticket. A few minutes later, another airline supervisor arrived carrying a tablet. He looked at Evelyn before checking the screen several times. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes." "I'm afraid there's been a seating issue." Evelyn remained calm. "What kind of issue?" "It appears your seat has been reassigned." She blinked once. "I don't understand. The flight is completely full. A priority traveler arrived after another flight was cancelled. Management has decided to move you to tomorrow morning's flight." No anger appeared on Evelyn's face. She simply looked at her boarding pass for a moment. "I booked this ticket 3 months ago." "I understand. I also have somewhere important to be." "I'm very sorry, ma'am." The supervisor sounded polite, but his decision had already been made. Several people nearby began whispering. Some believed the woman would start arguing. Others expected her to demand compensation. Instead, Evelyn quietly placed her boarding pass back into her pocket. "If there's truly no other choice," she said softly, "I'll leave." The supervisor looked relieved. "Thank you for understanding." She picked up her old canvas bag and slowly turned toward the terminal exit. No one noticed the small silver wings pinned inside her jacket. No one noticed the faded military bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve. And no one could possibly imagine that before the day ended, every person on that aircraft would wish she had never left. Evelyn Carter slowly walked away from the boarding gate without looking back. Her steps were calm, but each one carried the weight of disappointment. She had promised someone she would arrive before sunrise. Missing this flight meant breaking that promise. The airport around her remained busy. Travelers rushed from one gate to another. Children laughed, and rolling suitcases echoed across the polished floor. Life continued as if nothing had happened. Only one little girl sitting near the window noticed Evelyn's sad smile. The child tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad. Why is that grandma leaving? Wasn't she getting on the airplane?" Her father looked up briefly. "I don't know, sweetheart." The little girl watched Evelyn disappear into the crowd. Something about the old woman didn't seem ordinary. Inside the aircraft, passengers settled into their seats. Some opened laptops. Others searched for movies. A businessman wearing an expensive navy suit placed his leather briefcase in the overhead bin before checking his watch for the 5th time. His name was Richard Hale. He believed every minute of his schedule was worth thousands of dollars. As the final passengers boarded, Richard pressed the call button. A flight attendant approached politely. "Good evening, sir. How may I help you? I was supposed to have seat 2A. She looked at her tablet. "I'm sorry, sir. Seat 2A was already assigned." Richard frowned. "I have elite platinum status." "I understand, sir." "I don't think you do." His voice remained calm, but everyone nearby could hear the confidence behind it. I spend a great deal of money with this airline. I appreciate your loyalty. Then I expect the service that comes with it. The flight attendant forced a professional smile. I'll speak with the gate supervisor. Richard nodded. I'll wait. A few rows behind him, passengers quietly exchanged looks. Some had already guessed what was happening. Someone would probably lose a seat. No one imagined that person had already left the aircraft. The supervisor entered a few moments later. She leaned down beside Richard. Mr. Hale, thank you for your patience. I assume the problem has been fixed? She hesitated. Unfortunately, the passenger has already left the terminal. Richard smiled slightly. Good. He leaned back comfortably. I appreciate efficient service. The supervisor nodded politely, although something about the conversation made her uncomfortable. She couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity of the elderly woman who had accepted the decision without raising her voice. Or perhaps it was the feeling that the situation had never been fair. Several minutes later, the aircraft door remained open. The captain had not yet arrived. Passengers began checking their watches. Richard sighed impatiently. What is taking so long? Nobody answered. At the far end of the jet bridge, a tall man wearing a captain's uniform walked toward the airplane carrying a flight bag. His silver hair showed years of experience. His name was Captain Nathan Brooks. Unlike many pilots, he always greeted the cabin crew before entering the cockpit. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Captain. As he reviewed the passenger manifest, one line caught his attention. Seat 18C. Passenger removed before departure. Reason: seat reassignment. Nathan stopped walking. Who was removed? The supervisor checked her tablet. An elderly passenger named Evelyn Carter. Nathan looked up. What did you say? Evelyn Carter. For a brief moment, the captain's expression changed. His face lost all color. The smile disappeared. He slowly repeated the name. Evelyn Carter? Yes, Captain. He looked toward the open aircraft door. Is she still in the terminal? I'm not sure. Nathan closed the passenger manifest. His voice became firm. Do not close this aircraft. The supervisor blinked. Captain? I asked a question. I think she may still be inside the terminal. Nathan handed his flight bag to the first officer. I'll be back. Without another word, he turned and walked quickly toward the jet bridge. The cabin crew stared at each other in confusion. Passengers began whispering. Richard crossed his arms. What is going on now? No one knew the answer. But somewhere inside the airport, an elderly woman carrying a worn canvas bag had just reached the main waiting area. She had no idea that a captain was searching every hallway, every coffee shop, and every quiet corner of the terminal. Hoping he wasn't already too late, Captain Nathan Brooks moved through the terminal faster than anyone had ever seen him walk. Travelers stepped aside as he searched every waiting area with growing urgency. He looked inside coffee shops, checked empty seats near the large windows, and even glanced toward the baggage claim entrance. Evelyn, he whispered. Please still be here. His first officer, Liam Foster, caught up a minute later. Captain, operations wants us back on the aircraft. We're already behind schedule. Nathan never slowed down. They can wait. Liam looked confused. Sir. Who exactly is this passenger? Nathan stopped for the first time. He looked toward the rain-covered runway before answering quietly. Someone who once gave me another chance to live. Liam stared at him. You know her? Nathan nodded. More than that. She changed my life. Liam had flown with Nathan for almost 5 years. He had never heard him speak like this. Nathan was known for staying calm in every situation. Today, there was worry in his eyes. Near the airport bookstore, Evelyn sat alone with a paper cup of tea. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She simply watched the rain slide down the enormous glass windows. Her phone vibrated. A message appeared from her younger sister. Will you make it tonight? Evelyn smiled sadly before typing. Not this time. I'll come tomorrow. She didn't explain what had happened. She had spent most of her life solving problems for others. Complaining had never become one of her habits. A young airport employee approached carefully. "Excuse me, ma'am." "Yes. I saw what happened earlier." Evelyn smiled politely. "It's all right." "No. It isn't." He looked embarrassed. "My grandmother always says people deserve respect before status." Evelyn's smile became warmer. "Your grandmother sounds very wise." The young man laughed softly. "She'd probably like you." Before Evelyn could answer, another voice echoed across the waiting area. "Dr. Carter." Several people looked around. Nathan hurried toward her. "Evelyn." She slowly stood. "Nathan?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan smiled like a student seeing his favorite teacher after many years. "I finally found you." She looked surprised. "I didn't expect to see you again. You weren't supposed to leave." She gently lifted her boarding pass. "I thought your airline made that decision." Nathan looked genuinely upset. "No. I wasn't even told until I read the passenger list." Evelyn remained calm. "It's all right." "No." Nathan shook his head. "It isn't." People nearby had stopped walking. Curious travelers quietly watched the conversation. The captain stood respectfully in front of the elderly woman. Not because she demanded respect, but because she had earned it years ago. Liam finally walked over. Nathan turned toward him. "Liam, this is Dr. Evelyn Carter." Liam smiled politely. "It's an honor to meet you." Evelyn shook his hand. "The honor is mine." Nathan laughed. "No, you don't understand." He looked back at Evelyn. "I wouldn't be wearing these captain's stripes today if it wasn't for her." Liam frowned. "What do you mean?" Nathan looked across the rainy airport. 22 years ago, I was a brand new rescue helicopter pilot. I thought I knew everything. I was wrong." Evelyn smiled. "You were young." "I was reckless," Nathan corrected. Liam listened carefully. Nathan continued. "A mountain rescue went terribly wrong. Our helicopter clipped heavy ice during a storm. We barely made it back. I was seriously injured. And he looked at Evelyn with quiet gratitude. Worked for 16 straight hours to save my life." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "I only did my job." Nathan smiled. "You always say that. But everyone at that hospital knew the truth." Liam looked amazed. "So, she's a doctor?" Nathan nodded. "One of the finest trauma specialists I've ever known." Just then, the airline supervisor hurried toward them. She looked nervous. "Captain, operations is asking why the aircraft hasn't departed." Nathan calmly turned toward her. "I have the answer." She waited. "Dr. Carter is returning to the aircraft." The supervisor hesitated. "Sir." Her seat has already been reassigned. Nathan's expression remained calm. "Then we'll solve it. The aircraft will not leave without her." The supervisor looked uncomfortable. "But the passenger in that seat is one of our highest value customers." Nathan answered without raising his voice. "Every passenger who buys a ticket has value." Silence filled the terminal. Even nearby travelers stopped pretending not to listen. For the first time that evening, someone had finally said what everyone else had been thinking. Nathan looked at Evelyn. "Will you come back with me?" She remained silent for several seconds. Then she looked through the giant airport windows toward the waiting aircraft. "I don't want anyone else to lose their seat because of me." Nathan smiled gently. "Trust me, I'm not asking anyone to lose a seat. I'm asking everyone to remember what fairness looks like." Evelyn looked into his eyes. After a long pause, she quietly nodded. "All right." Together, they turned and began walking back toward the aircraft. Neither of them noticed dozens of passengers watching through the terminal windows. But inside the airplane, one impatient businessman had no idea that the captain was returning. And this time, he wasn't coming back alone. Nathan and Evelyn walked side by side through the terminal without saying much. Sometimes silence carried more meaning than long conversations. The passengers who recognized the captain stared in surprise. It wasn't every day they saw a senior pilot personally escorting someone back to an aircraft. The rain outside had become heavier. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and bright flashes of lightning briefly lit up the runway. Airport workers hurried across the wet pavement, trying to finish their jobs before the storm became worse. Nathan glanced toward the dark sky. This weather is arriving faster than expected. Evelyn followed his eyes. It doesn't feel like an ordinary storm. Nathan looked at her. You still trust your instincts? She smiled softly. They've kept me alive for a long time. As they reached the boarding gate, the airline supervisor stepped forward. Dr. Carter. I truly want to apologize. Evelyn smiled kindly. We all make mistakes. I should have handled it differently. The important thing, Evelyn replied, is learning from today. The supervisor lowered her head. Thank you for your kindness. Nathan could tell the apology was sincere. He also knew many people would have reacted with anger. Evelyn had chosen dignity instead. That alone spoke volumes about the person she was. Inside the aircraft, passengers noticed movement outside the cabin door. Whispers spread through the rows. Is that the woman from earlier? I think so. Why is the captain walking with her? Richard Hale looked up from his laptop. His confident expression slowly faded. He hadn't expected to see Evelyn again. He certainly hadn't expected the captain himself to escort her. Nathan stepped into the cabin first. His calm voice filled the aircraft. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The cabin immediately became quiet. I appreciate your patience. We experienced an issue before departure. That issue has now been resolved. He stepped slightly aside. Evelyn entered the aircraft carrying nothing more than her old canvas bag. Some passengers smiled. Others looked embarrassed after remembering how quickly they had judged her. Nathan turned toward the flight attendants. Please prepare seat 2A. One attendant looked confused. But Captain. Nathan answered politely. Seat 2A belongs to Dr. Carter. Richard immediately stood. Excuse me. Nathan faced him calmly. Yes, sir? I was informed that seat had been reassigned. Nathan nodded. It was. And now, it has been restored to its original passenger. Richard folded his arms. I don't think that's acceptable. Nathan remained completely calm. I understand your disappointment. I have an important business meeting tomorrow morning. I hope it goes well. Richard blinked. That's your answer? My responsibility, Nathan said, is to ensure every passenger is treated fairly. The cabin became silent again. Richard realized no one was supporting his complaint. Instead, several passengers quietly watched him, waiting to see what he would do next. After a few seconds, he slowly sat back down. I'll remember this. Nathan smiled politely. I hope you remember the entire day. Without another word, Richard looked away. Evelyn settled into seat 2A. She placed her worn canvas bag beneath the seat in front of her. Nathan leaned slightly closer. I'm glad you came back. So am I. You still haven't told me why tonight was so important. For the first time, Evelyn's smile disappeared. She reached into her bag and carefully removed an old photograph. It showed 3 young people standing beside a rescue helicopter many years earlier. Nathan immediately recognized himself. Standing beside him was a smiling young woman, and next to her, a little boy no older than 8. Nathan stared at the picture. I haven't seen this photo in years. Evelyn gently touched the image. The little boy. Nathan nodded slowly. Ben. He'd be 30 now. Evelyn looked out the window. He invited me to his wedding. Nathan's expression froze. What? The ceremony is tomorrow morning. Nathan suddenly understood everything. You were flying there because of Ben. Yes. He insisted I sit in the front row. Nathan smiled. That sounds exactly like him. He still says you and I are the reason he believes heroes are real. Evelyn laughed quietly. We were never heroes. We simply refused to quit. Nathan looked toward the cockpit door. Ben is going to be very happy when he sees you. I hope so. A flight attendant entered the cockpit a few moments later. Captain, boarding is complete. Nathan stood. I'll see you after we land. I'll be here. As he turned to leave, Evelyn quietly said, Nathan. He looked back. Whatever happens tonight, fly safely. Nathan smiled. I always try. He disappeared into the cockpit. Evelyn leaned back in her seat. Outside, another flash of lightning illuminated the clouds. For reasons she couldn't explain. She suddenly felt uneasy. Not afraid. Just concerned. She had learned over decades that sometimes the heart noticed danger long before the eyes could see it. She looked through the rain-covered window once more and whispered to herself, I hope I'm wrong. Far ahead on the runway, a strong gust of wind pushed against the waiting aircraft. Inside the cockpit, Nathan noticed the weather radar beginning to change. A yellow patch slowly grew into orange. Then orange began turning red. Nathan exchanged a quiet look with First Officer Liam. Neither man spoke, but both knew. Tonight's flight might become far more challenging than anyone on board expected. The aircraft slowly began pushing back from the gate. Passengers settled into silence as the engines came alive with a deep, steady hum. Outside, rain raced across the windows while flashing ground lights reflected from the soaked pavement. Inside the cockpit, Captain Nathan Brooks carefully reviewed every instrument. Everything looked normal. Yet something continued to bother him. He looked once more at the weather radar. The red storm cell had doubled in size within only a few minutes. Liam, Nathan said quietly. I see it, the first officer replied. The forecast didn't mention anything developing this quickly. Nathan nodded. Let's request a different route before takeoff. Liam immediately contacted ground control. A few moments later, the answer came back. Flight 728. Your requested route is currently unavailable because of traffic congestion. Maintain your planned departure. Nathan thanked the controller before ending the transmission. He leaned back for a moment. I don't like this. Neither did Liam. But the weather was still within safe operating limits. There was no reason to delay. At least not yet. In seat 2A, Evelyn quietly looked through the rain-covered window. Her fingers gently rested on the old photograph still lying inside her lap. She smiled as she remembered Ben running through hospital hallways years ago, laughing despite months of difficult treatment. He had once told her something she would never forget. Real heroes don't wear capes. They stay when everyone else leaves. She folded the photograph carefully and placed it back inside her bag. Across the aisle, a young mother struggled to calm her little son. The boy looked no older than 6. Every clap of thunder made him jump. Evelyn leaned across the aisle. Would you like to borrow something? The little boy looked at her. She reached inside her bag and pulled out a tiny wooden airplane. It had scratches on its wings from years of use. I carved this for my grandson. The child's frightened face slowly changed into a smile. Really? She nodded. You can keep it safe until we land. His mother smiled gratefully. Thank you so much. Evelyn simply nodded. Sometimes a small act of kindness could calm a frightened heart better than any words. Back in seat 9C, Richard Hale watched everything. He noticed how naturally people smiled around Evelyn. He didn't understand it. Earlier that evening she had looked like an ordinary elderly traveler. Now everyone seemed drawn toward her calm presence. For reasons he couldn't explain, he began wondering if he had judged her too quickly. He quietly looked out the window. The rain was becoming heavier. Much heavier. A flight attendant secured the final overhead compartment. Cabin secure, Captain. Nathan acknowledged the report. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice echoed through the cabin. This is your captain speaking. We're number 2 for departure. The weather ahead includes moderate rain, so the climb may feel a little bumpy. Our crew is fully prepared, and we'll do everything possible to ensure a safe and comfortable flight. Passengers relaxed after hearing his calm voice. Even the young boy holding the wooden airplane smiled. Moments later, the aircraft rolled onto the runway. The engines increased power. Everyone felt themselves gently pushed back into their seats. The airplane accelerated through the rain. Then, it lifted smoothly into the night sky. The city lights quickly disappeared beneath thick clouds. Rain struck the windshield with increasing force. For several minutes, everything remained perfectly normal. Seatbelt signs stayed on. Passengers quietly read books or watched movies. The little boy beside the aisle had already fallen asleep while holding the wooden airplane. Nathan smiled as the aircraft climbed above 10,000 feet. So far so good. Liam adjusted the weather display. His smile slowly disappeared. Nathan. What is it? The storm. Nathan looked at the screen. The red weather cell had spread across nearly their entire planned route. Even worse. Several smaller storm cells had begun joining together. What in the world? Liam whispered. Nathan immediately contacted air traffic control. Center, Flight 728 requesting 20-degree deviation right for weather. Static filled the cockpit. Then the controller answered. Flight 728, unable at this time due to crossing traffic. Stand by. Nathan exchanged another glance with Liam. Neither pilot liked waiting when weather continued growing. Far behind the cockpit, Evelyn suddenly opened her eyes. She hadn't been sleeping. Something felt different. Not because of turbulence. Not because of the rain. She simply noticed the subtle change in the engine sound. It lasted only a second. Then everything returned to normal. Most passengers never noticed. Evelyn did. She quietly looked toward the front of the aircraft. Years of listening to helicopters, rescue aircraft, and medical transport planes had trained her ears to notice tiny changes. She hoped it was nothing. She truly hoped so. Nathan's voice came over the cabin speakers once again. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making a slight course adjustment due to weather ahead. Outside the windows, lightning illuminated enormous black clouds stretching across the horizon. The peaceful flight was ending. And somewhere inside those towering storm clouds, a challenge was waiting that none of the passengers could possibly imagine. The first jolt came without warning. It wasn't violent, but it was enough to wake every sleeping passenger. A few gasps echoed through the cabin as the aircraft gently shook before becoming steady again. Captain Nathan kept both hands firmly on the controls. Small turbulence, he said calmly. Liam nodded while studying the weather radar. The storm is growing faster than expected. Nathan adjusted the heading slightly. Let's stay clear of the strongest cell. Outside the windshield, thick clouds surrounded the aircraft like giant dark mountains. Lightning flashed deep inside them, lighting the sky for only a second before darkness returned. Inside the cabin, the seatbelt sign remained on. Most passengers stayed quiet. Some looked nervous. Others whispered prayers. Evelyn noticed the young boy across the aisle gripping the little wooden airplane she had given him. She smiled. It's going to be all right. The boy smiled back. He believed her. Sometimes children could recognize calmness better than adults. A flight attendant slowly walked through the aisle, checking seatbelts one last time. Her name was Mia. She had worked on airplanes for almost 10 years. She had experienced turbulence many times before. Still, something about tonight felt different. She reached Evelyn's row. Are you comfortable, ma'am? Evelyn nodded. I'm perfectly fine. Mia smiled. I wish every passenger stayed this calm. Evelyn laughed softly. Worry never solved a problem. Before Mia could answer, another gentle bump shook the aircraft. This one lasted a little longer. Several passengers tightened their seatbelts. Richard Hale looked away from his laptop for the first time in over an hour. He finally closed it. His business presentation no longer seemed important. Outside, nature demanded everyone's attention. In the cockpit, warning tones quietly sounded. Liam checked the display. Heavy rain ahead. Nathan reduced speed slightly. We'll make this ride as smooth as possible. Air traffic control approved a small change in course. The aircraft slowly turned south, avoiding the darkest part of the storm. For several minutes, everything improved. The turbulence almost disappeared. Passengers relaxed. Conversation slowly returned. The little boy even began pretending his wooden airplane was flying through imaginary clouds. His laughter spread through the nearby rows. Several passengers smiled. Even Richard couldn't help smiling for a moment. Evelyn watched the boy. She remembered another little boy doing exactly the same thing many years ago. Ben. He had always dreamed of becoming a pilot like Nathan. Life had taken him in another direction. But he never stopped loving airplanes. Nathan looked at the instrument panel. Everything remained normal. Fuel, hydraulics, electrical systems, engine performance, all perfect. He finally allowed himself a deep breath. Looks like we're getting around it. Liam smiled. I think you're right. Suddenly, a bright flash filled the cockpit. Lightning struck somewhere outside the aircraft. A loud crack echoed through the cabin. Several passengers screamed. The airplane shook sharply for only a second before becoming stable again. Warning lights briefly flickered, then disappeared. Nathan immediately checked every instrument. Report. Liam moved quickly. Engines normal. Flight controls normal. Electrical systems normal. Nathan nodded. Good. The aircraft continued flying safely. Inside the cabin, passengers looked frightened. Mia picked up the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Everything is under control. Her calm voice helped settle the cabin. Evelyn quietly looked around. An elderly man across the aisle seemed to be breathing faster than before. His hands trembled. His wife held his arm. George, I'm okay. But he didn't sound okay. Evelyn gently unbuckled her seatbelt. Mia immediately noticed. Mom. I'll only be a moment. The aircraft was stable again. Mia carefully walked over. Is something wrong? Evelyn pointed discreetly. The gentleman in row 7. I think he's having more than anxiety. Mia looked carefully. George's face had become unusually pale. Tiny drops of sweat covered his forehead. He pressed one hand against the center of his chest. His wife looked terrified. I think my husband needs help. Mia immediately picked up the cabin phone. Captain. Nathan answered instantly. Go ahead. We may have a medical emergency. Nathan's eyes met Liam's. The storm had almost been left behind. Now, a completely different challenge had begun. Evelyn calmly stood beside George's seat. She gently smiled. My name is Evelyn. I used to help people in situations like this. George looked into her calm eyes. For the first time since the pain had started, he felt hope. George leaned back in his seat, trying to hide the pain. His breathing became shorter with every passing second. His wife, Helen, held his hand tightly. Please don't leave me, she whispered. George forced a weak smile. I'm trying. Evelyn knelt beside him. George, I need you to answer a few questions. He nodded. Where exactly is the pain? He slowly pointed to the center of his chest. It started here. Does it spread anywhere else? My left shoulder. And my jaw. Evelyn looked at Helen. When did this begin? About 5 minutes ago. Has he ever had heart problems? Helen nodded nervously. He had a mild heart attack 3 years ago. Evelyn remained calm. She gently felt George's wrist. His pulse was fast and uneven. She looked toward Mia. We need the emergency medical kit and oxygen. Mia didn't hesitate. I'll get it. Several passengers nearby noticed what was happening. The cabin became completely silent. Even Richard Hale stood up halfway before sitting back down again. For the first time that evening, he wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about the frightened couple sitting only a few rows away. Within seconds, Mia returned carrying the emergency medical kit. Another flight attendant brought a portable oxygen cylinder. Evelyn carefully placed the oxygen mask over George's face. Take slow, deep breaths. George followed her instructions. His breathing slowly became steadier. Mia looked worried. Should we ask if there's a doctor on board? Evelyn nodded. Yes. The announcement echoed through the cabin. If there is a licensed medical professional on board, please identify yourself to a member of the cabin crew. Everyone waited. A young woman stood from row 15. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She hurried forward. I'm an emergency physician. Evelyn smiled warmly. I'm glad you're here. Sarah quickly introduced herself before examining George. She looked at Evelyn. You've already done exactly what I would have done. Evelyn smiled. Old habits. Sarah noticed Evelyn's confidence. You worked in emergency medicine? For many years. Sarah nodded with respect. I can tell. Together, they worked quietly. One monitored George's breathing. The other checked his blood pressure. Neither wasted a single movement. Inside the cockpit, Nathan received an update. "Captain," Mia called. "We have a physician assisting Dr. Carter." Nathan let out a small breath of relief. "How's the passenger?" "Stable for now. But they recommend medical evaluation as soon as possible." Nathan immediately contacted Air Traffic Control Center, Flight 728 requesting priority landing due to a medical emergency. The controller answered within seconds. "Flight 728, cleared direct to Riverton Regional Airport. Descend at pilot's discretion. Emergency services will be standing by." Nathan thanked the controller. He looked at Liam. "We're diverting." Liam entered the new route. "We'll be on the ground in about 22 minutes. Nathan made a calm announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. One of our passengers requires urgent medical care. We have been given priority to land at the nearest airport. We appreciate your patience and cooperation." Nobody complained. Instead, several passengers quietly nodded. Life was more important than schedules. Even Richard completely agreed. He looked toward George and silently hoped the man would be all right. Back in row 7, George slowly opened his eyes. His color had improved. The oxygen was helping. He looked at Evelyn. "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to. I thought." His voice cracked. "I thought this was the end." Evelyn gently squeezed his hand. "Not today." Helen wiped tears from her eyes. "I'll never forget what you've done." Evelyn smiled. "One day someone helped me when I needed it most. So I promised myself I would always do the same." Sarah looked at Evelyn with admiration. "You've probably saved hundreds of people." Evelyn thought for a moment. "I stopped counting years ago." Sarah laughed softly. "I hope I can say that someday." "You will. Just remember, people won't always remember your medical skills. They'll remember how safe you made them feel." Sarah quietly nodded. Those words stayed with her. Outside the windows, the storm had almost disappeared. The clouds slowly opened. City lights appeared below. In the distance, flashing blue and red emergency vehicles waited beside the runway. Nathan lowered the landing gear. Everything on the aircraft was working perfectly. Liam smiled. "Runway in sight." Nathan nodded. "Let's bring everyone home safely." A few moments later, the wheels touched the runway with a smooth landing. Passengers burst into spontaneous applause. Some clapped for the pilots. Others looked toward Evelyn and Dr. Sarah. But Evelyn simply sat quietly. She wasn't interested in recognition. She was only relieved that George was still smiling. As the aircraft slowed to a stop, ambulances raced toward them. No one knew that the events of this night would soon make headlines across the country. Not because of the emergency itself, but because of one humble woman whose quiet actions reminded everyone what true compassion looked like. The aircraft door slowly opened. Cool night air rushed into the cabin as emergency responders climbed the stairs carrying medical equipment. Two paramedics quickly reached George while Dr. Sarah Mitchell gave a clear report. Male 68 years old. Chest pain began approximately 30 minutes ago. Oxygen administered immediately. Vital signs improved during flight. One of the paramedics nodded. "Excellent work." George looked at Evelyn before being placed onto the stretcher. "You promised me this wasn't the end." Evelyn smiled. "And I always keep my promises." George reached for her hand. "When I get better, my wife and I would like to thank you properly. You don't owe me anything." "We do." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "You reminded us that complete strangers can still care." The paramedics wheeled George toward the waiting ambulance. Before the doors closed, George raised the little wooden airplane the young boy had insisted he keep for good luck. Everyone nearby smiled. Passengers slowly began leaving the aircraft. Instead of rushing toward the terminal, many stopped beside Evelyn. A young couple thanked her. An elderly man shook her hand. A college student quietly said, "My grandmother was a nurse. You remind me of her." Evelyn smiled. "She must have been a wonderful woman." The student nodded proudly. The best. Even the little boy who had borrowed the wooden airplane ran back with his mother. He carefully held it in both hands. I almost forgot. He offered it back. You said it belongs to your grandson. Evelyn gently pushed it toward him. I think it belongs to you now. The boy's eyes became wide. Really? She nodded. Whenever you're afraid, remember that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared. The boy hugged the tiny airplane tightly. I'll never lose it. His mother wiped away tears. Thank you. Nathan finished the final paperwork before stepping into the terminal. He immediately looked around. Evelyn was sitting quietly near a window, exactly as she had been earlier that evening. Only now, she wasn't alone. Several airport employees had gathered nearby simply to thank her. Nathan walked over carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. I remembered. Evelyn laughed softly. You still bring too much sugar. And you still drink yours black. He handed her the cup. For old times. She accepted it. For old times. For several minutes, they simply watched the rain. Neither felt the need to fill the silence. Finally Nathan spoke. I've wanted to ask you something for years. Evelyn looked at him. Why did you stay with me after the helicopter accident? The hospital director said I probably wouldn't survive. You had every reason to go home. Evelyn smiled thoughtfully. My father once told me something. Nathan listened. He said, never decide someone else's ending. Nathan remained quiet. She continued. Doctors can treat injuries. Medicine can fight disease. But hope. She looked at Nathan. Hope sometimes keeps a person alive long enough for everything else to work. Nathan lowered his eyes. I never forgot your voice. What do you mean? When I couldn't open my eyes. I remember hearing someone say, you're not alone. Evelyn smiled gently. I said that to every patient. Nathan shook his head. You meant it. Just then, Liam hurried toward them holding his phone. Captain. Nathan looked up. You should see this. He handed Nathan the screen. A passenger had already uploaded a short video from inside the cabin. The video didn't show the medical emergency. Instead, it showed Evelyn comforting the frightened little boy before the landing. Millions of people were already watching it. Comments poured in every second. This woman reminds me of my grandmother. Kindness still exists. Someone find out who she is. The world needs more people like her. Nathan smiled. It seems people finally noticed. Evelyn looked uncomfortable. I don't need attention. I know. But maybe. Nathan replied. Someone out there needs your example. Before she could answer, the airport manager approached with several employees. His expression was sincere. Dr. Carter? Yes. I've already spoken with our airline headquarters. He paused before continuing. We learned what happened before boarding. I want to personally apologize. It should never have happened. Evelyn nodded kindly. Thank you. We'd also like to arrange transportation, so you can still attend your grandson's wedding tomorrow morning. Nathan looked surprised. How? The manager smiled. A company helicopter is available at sunrise. It will take Dr. Carter directly to the city. Evelyn looked speechless. You'd really do that? The manager nodded. It's the least we can do. For the first time that night, Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, not because she had been treated unfairly earlier, but because one act of kindness had inspired another, and another, until complete strangers had become friends. As dawn slowly approached, the storm clouds finally disappeared. The first rays of sunlight broke across the airport runway. Nathan stood beside the helicopter as its engine started. Liam loaded Evelyn's small canvas bag into the cabin. Before climbing aboard, Evelyn turned toward Nathan. I suppose this is goodbye. Nathan smiled. I don't think so. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. What's this? Open it after the wedding. She smiled curiously. I will. The helicopter slowly lifted into the morning sky. Nathan watched until it became a tiny dot on the horizon. He had no idea that inside the envelope was something that would change Evelyn's life forever. And when she opened it after the wedding, she would discover that the greatest surprise of her journey had nothing to do with airplanes. It had everything to do with family. The helicopter disappeared into the golden morning sky. Captain Nathan Brooks stood quietly on the landing pad until it became nothing more than a tiny black dot against the rising sun. Liam walked beside him. "I've never seen you care about a passenger the way you cared about Dr. Carter." Nathan smiled. "That's because she was never just a passenger." Liam looked curious. What was in the envelope? Nathan looked toward the horizon. A thank you, and something that should have been given to her years ago. 3 hours later, the helicopter landed beside a beautiful countryside estate, where white flowers decorated every pathway. Music drifted through the fresh morning air. Guests smiled as they gathered for the wedding ceremony. A young man standing near the entrance suddenly looked toward the helicopter. His eyes became wide. "Evelyn." Ben ran as fast as he could. Without caring about his expensive wedding suit, he wrapped his arms around her. "You came." Evelyn hugged him tightly. "I promised I would. I thought your flight." She smiled. "It became a longer journey than I expected." Ben laughed through happy tears. "I don't care how you got here. I'm just glad you're here." His fiancée, Emma, walked over with a warm smile. "So this is the woman I've heard about for years." Evelyn smiled. "And you must be the lucky woman." Emma hugged her gently. "Thank you for making sure Ben had someone to look up to." Evelyn looked surprised. "I didn't do very much." Ben left. "You still don't realize how many lives you've changed." The wedding ceremony began beneath a large oak tree. Friends and family watched as Ben and Emma exchanged their vows. When it was time for family blessings, Ben surprised everyone. He stepped away from the microphone. "I'd like to invite someone very special." He looked directly at Evelyn. "Please come stand beside us." The guests applauded as Evelyn slowly walked forward. Ben smiled. "When I was 8 years old, I almost lost hope after losing both of my parents. The woman standing beside me today never allowed me to believe I was alone. She attended every school play, every graduation, every birthday. She wasn't related to me by blood, but she chose to become my family." Many guests wiped tears from their eyes. Emma reached for Evelyn's hand. "Our children will know you as Grandma Evelyn." The words caught Evelyn completely by surprise. She covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. For the first time in many years, she couldn't find the right words. She simply hugged both of them. Later that afternoon, after the celebration ended, Evelyn finally remembered the envelope Nathan had given her. She sat alone beneath the same oak tree where the ceremony had taken place. Carefully she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. It read, "Dear Evelyn, for 22 years I've wanted to thank you properly. You didn't just save my life. You gave me the courage to become the man I hoped to be. Every passenger I've flown safely home. Every young pilot I've trained. Every family reunited because of those flights. All of it became possible because you refused to give up on one frightened young man. There's one more thing. Several former patients, nurses, pilots, and friends have quietly created something in your honor. Please turn the page." Evelyn slowly unfolded the second sheet. It contained one sentence. "The Carter Foundation for Young Emergency Medical Students officially opens next month. And it will carry your name forever." Below the message were hundreds of signatures. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, pilots, former patients, families, people whose lives had somehow been touched by one quiet woman who never asked for recognition. A single tear rolled down Evelyn's cheek. Not because of the foundation, but because she finally realized something. Kindness never disappears. It simply continues through the people we choose to help. Several weeks later, the Carter Foundation welcomed its very first group of medical students. Nathan stood at the back of the room beside Liam. Sarah Mitchell was there too. So were George and Helen. George looked healthier than ever. The little boy from the airplane arrived carrying something in his hands. It was the same tiny wooden airplane. He walked over to Evelyn. "I wanted you to see it." I kept my promise. I never lost it. Evelyn smiled. And I hope you never lose what it reminds you of. The boy nodded. I won't. What does it remind me of? He asked. Evelyn gently answered. That one kind person can change someone else's entire future. The audience applauded. Nathan quietly whispered to Liam. That's the lesson I learned from her. Liam smiled. And now, everyone else gets to learn it too. Outside, children laughed beneath a bright blue sky. The storm from that unforgettable night was long gone. But the kindness born from it continued to spread. One person. One family. One act of compassion at a time.